Hello, I'm Dan Laxer, and welcome to What's Literacy by Literacy Quebec. What's Literacy is a community-based podcast for English-speaking lifelong literacy learners, where we explore topics around community building, lifelong curiosity, and the multiple types of literacy. We're recording this podcast on Thursday, August 7th, so just over 3 weeks away from the start of the new school year. So today we're going to be talking about transitioning back to school. And as you would expect, given that there are different levels in school, there are different levels of transition and different, say, anxieties that go along with them. The transition from daycare and kindergarten to elementary school, transition to high school, transitioning for those with learning or language challenges. How do kids and their parents navigate all those transitions? Well, to help us answer these questions, we welcome our guest this episode, Joseph D'Intino with the Montreal Fluency Centre. Welcome to What's Literacy.
All right. Thank you so much, Dan. It's a pleasure to
Uh,
be here.
Well, before we get into today's topic, tell me a little bit about yourself and the Montreal Fluency Center.
Well, I'll start by talking about the Montreal Fluency Centre. The Montreal Fluency Centre is a not-for-profit organization in Westmount, um, where we offer services that is quite a large range. We have speech and language assessment and therapy services. We have academic interventions and programs. There's also psychoeducational assessments, consultation services, and supports for parents. And overall just really guiding families towards finding resources that are going to be helpful for them as they ensure that their children are getting the right services and education. So my role within that is, it's quite fun to be part of the Montreal Fluency Centre. I'm a school psychologist here. I get to work with a lot of speech language pathologists and other types of professionals.
Mhm.
Um, and so I do more of the psychoeducational assessments. Uh, I'm part of running some of those academic interventions and programs, and I do a lot of consultations with parents too to help guide them towards to services or resources that they might need, or even just generating ideas with them of what might work for their child. And that probably the thing that separates us most from a lot of other clinics is that we have a bursary program and really strive to make services accessible for families. It's really our priority and part of our mission, and it's a big reason why I'm here.
Mhm.
So I'm happy to be here to talk with you about back to school and see how MFC fits into that. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's great to have you. Tell me again what your position is at the center.
I'm a school psychologist.
Yeah. So I think you're perfect for this conversation. Whether you're helping, kids or whether you're helping their parents. I'll tell you where I'm coming from personally in terms of back to school transition. When my own son went from daycare to kindergarten, it was fine. But when he went from kindergarten to grade one, because the daycare and kindergarten were very similar. So all of a sudden he went from, sitting on a carpet on the floor cross-legged, playing with toys, playing with his friends, being read to sitting at a desk was an abrupt change. He was sitting at a desk and a chair, paying attention. And one day on the way home from school in the car, I asked him, "How do you like grade one?" His answer made me cry then. He's now 23, and it still makes me cry to this day. He said, "Well, it's okay, but when do we get to play?"
Mm, great
And
question.
yeah, absolutely. It was such an abrupt transition. And as a parent, I wasn't sure if I was supposed to have an answer to the question or not. But what is that transition like?
Well, I think that your son summed up a feeling for a lot of kids, um, and not just at the kindergarten to grade one level, but throughout. School is hard. It takes a lot of work and effort, and play is creative and fun, and there are plenty of opportunities for that creativity. But it's definitely more structured in a school environment than it would be if he was on summer vacation, as he would be at this time of
Does
year,
it
right?
have to be?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So as a parent, I'm sure he handled it very well. First of all, I love that you asked him an open-ended question, right? Because if you just asked him if school was good today, he could have said yes or no, and you would have never gotten that from him.
Yeah.
So that was great. And the other part of that is, how do you answer a kid about that? Well, you be honest, right? It is a transition, and when do you get to play? Well, there's plenty of opportunity at recess, and I'm sure there are games in the classroom. It just looks different than what it was in kindergarten. Um, and sometimes that loss of play from kindergarten to grade one, it's really about acknowledging that. Like, wouldn't it be great if we could just spend all day doing what we did in kindergarten, right? And saying that sometimes is so reassuring to a child. Um, and guiding them towards what the expectations are as they increase demands in the classroom. As you said, it's a big jump from kindergarten to grade one. Kindergarten is really all about establishing routines, the expectations within a school environment of how to get along with other kids, learning how to socialize, learning how to follow instructions,
Yeah.
getting a little bit of the literacy part, but really it's those are the biggest things, right? And then the real work on alphabet and writing and reading really starts to hit home in grade one. Not that there's none of that in kindergarten, there's plenty,
Yes,
but
of course. And he
but the
did get a lot
transition,
of that.
yeah.
It was impressive to see
Mhm.
the way teachers handled, giving them letters and giving them even mathematics in daycare. But yeah,
Right.
absolutely. So
Yeah.
why are these transitions, and we'll get into the different levels of transition, why are they so difficult?
Well, I think the biggest part that makes them difficult is the unknown, right? Anytime that we have something that's unknown, people can get nervous. They can ask questions. They can feel like they're not prepared. So that's, I think, the biggest reason why that they're challenging, and one of the biggest reasons, personally, why I don't like September. Right, September is
Yeah.
all about the changing of routines and establishing all these things. Um, it's exciting that everyone gets to start these new things, but there's a lot of those little growing pains that go through finding, the route to school and knowing where to, when you get there, where do you put your stuff? Where do you put your books? Who's your teacher? Like, there's so many questions that come with it. So I think that's the biggest thing, and those questions can happen at any level. Even up to university. Which professor am I going to have this semester? What's that person like? What are the expectations going to be? And it happens throughout a person's entire academic journey. It's just that unknown every time you start a new course or a new class. Now, of course, as children age, they have these schemas, these understandings of what's expected at school,
Hmm.
but there's always those elements of the unknown, right? Like like I said, knowing if they're going to be a good fit with the teachers, are they going to have friends in their classroom? That's usually the most common question I think that kids have. Like, oh, will this person be in my class? Right?
Yes.
Like it's
Yeah.
that's very common, and it's always that unknown, and it's so reassuring when they see a familiar face, or if they're welcomed really warmly into a classroom, or if they have a good understanding of what's expected of them as they're going into the school. You see a little bit more confidence, right, with the big fish in a little pond. Those kids in grade six or those kids in grade 11 who are walking in and they've got a lot of confidence because they know how the school works. They know almost every teacher in the school. They've got a little bit more confidence because they have that overall understanding of how that place works, right? So there's fewer unknowns for them. Obviously, challenges for each of those grades too, but you'll see more confidence from those kids because they know their environment.
Well, you're getting ahead of me because I wanted to ask you exactly that. Um,
Mhm.
does that mentality, does the transition, does it differ from grade to grade, even in elementary school?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting too, if you listen sometimes to the language that adults use around those transitions, there's always a little bit of a caution, I think, that we find so tempting to give kids, right? Like, oh, this is grade four, it's a big year, right? Like there's always a little
Yes.
bit of a statement like that.
And
And
we
it's
we
coming
kind of download our own anxieties onto our kids, I think, by doing that.
a little bit. It's coming from a place of good intention, right? It's all about giving the kid a heads up, but there's also the other side to that of, okay, maybe there's something to be concerned about. So, going back to what you did with your son of just asking, how do you like grade one? I think that is just a brilliant approach because if you ask something more open ended and that is less, I guess, leading in terms of a question, then you can have a more honest conversation around that and maybe not impose those types of things. But listen, these types of things happen inevitably, and there are challenges that come with every grade.
Yeah.
And it's true, adults are aware of that, and there's no point hiding that from kids either. But it's good to be measured in the way that we communicate about it. So, not to go through every grade level, but there's definitely some major ones, right? You mentioned kindergarten to grade one, that's a big jump. Sometimes doing the jump from grade two to grade three is a little bit of a big jump because
Hmm.
there's more focus on, like, as they get into to their language classes, more of a focus on reading comprehension than there was before.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
for some kids who haven't mastered that decoding, that can be really challenging. Those are some of the most common referrals that we'd see at the MFC. Some kids who just haven't mastered that literacy piece and need that help. So grade three jump is sometimes a challenge. Grade six into high school, right? Again, change of environment, change of expectations. There's sometimes, quite often, I guess, a mention of, okay, well, now this is high school. You've got to, pull up your socks and make sure that you're really making sure that learning is your responsibility right now. And parents are obviously still involved, but there's a bit of that messaging for kids that they've got more responsibility as they enter grade seven. Um,
You also get that, you have to start figuring out what you want to do. What do you want to be
yes,
when you grow up?
yeah.
It's right around the
It's
corner.
funny. If we could just take a little tangent there, I often joke that when we ask a kid in grade five and a student in grade 10 or 11 what they want to do when they grow up, their answers are not all that dissimilar, right? It's usually just a profession,
Yeah.
and they don't have enough knowledge to say, what, and I'll tell you for myself, I did not know that school psychologist was a role that I could be when I was old.
Hmm.
Maybe I knew that a psychologist was, but that wasn't on my radar when I was in grade 10 or grade 11. So it's really interesting, when you ask those types of questions. But that's, I guess, a conversation for another time. But the question itself of, okay, what's your plan? How are you going to keep your grades up? These types of things can definitely cause a little bit of stress and anxiety, especially in those who have had academic difficulties, right?
Hmm.
The beginning of the school year can be a little bit of feelings of dread that you're just going to repeat what happened last year. Um, but then there are others who really welcome the start of the school year. And I know that seems strange to say because in North American culture we're always joking about back to school as being something, you know, dreadful. But there are kids who absolutely need that structure, who need that connection with their teachers and their peers, who really welcome the start of the school year because maybe their summer wasn't as exciting as some of the other kids. Maybe they just really connect with their teachers a whole lot more than they connect with people at home.
There are also those
There's,
kids, and
but
goodness knows I wasn't one of them, who
mhm,
genuinely love school. They love to be in the
yeah,
environment, they love to learn, and they
for
can't wait to
sure.
get back there.
Yeah, absolutely. For those who thrive in that environment, it brings on new opportunities and new challenges and not just in the classroom, but there's also plenty of opportunities that are offered in schools for expanding interests and skills and extracurriculars. And that's another thing that's a big positive about the school year that can sometimes cause a little bit of stress just in terms of scheduling and
Mhm.
and wondering if kids are going to make a sports team or be part of a club. But once they get settled into those things, I mean, what an advantage, you know?
I want to talk about two things that you hit on. You mentioned how, once you've developed a group of peers, a group of friends, and how much easier that makes the transition. And you remind me of a story of, again, it's from my own personal life, but a classmate of my son's. This was before they became friends, and it was the first day of high school, and this little boy could not be consoled because try as they might to accommodate a kid and their friends, he was put in a class and all of his friends were put in the other class.
Yeah.
And the mom was struggling. Should she leave it as it is and help him deal with that? Or should she go talk to the school and say, can you put him with his friends? She honestly didn't know what to do. How important is that to a kid in that situation?
Well, for teenagers in general, their peer group is just so important, right?
Yeah.
So for many kids, that's really essential. But what's also essential and what they may not realize in the moment is that they need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable sometimes and welcome those
Mm,
opportunities for making new friendships and new connections. Um, I think the things to avoid and coping with that is um, to either downplay how they're feeling about it
mhm,
or to I, I guess I guess in the downplay category of just kind of invalidate, like at least there's this person, or at least you'll see them at recess. I mean, again, coming from a place of good intention, but the better way of going about it is probably to validate, like, wow, you must be so disappointed that you can't be in the same class as this person or your friends. And we also have an opportunity to work on making new friends. And so it's acknowledging both sides of it, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And I like how you put it. We have to learn to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yes.
And that's really interesting. You also talked about transitioning into the third grade. I
Mhm.
remember though when all of our kids were transitioning into the fifth grade. And we were
Right.
all gathering outside the school going, wow, grade five is going to be really hard because they have to start thinking about high school. And there was a different dynamic to the work that they were going to do in grade five. Um, Not that we have enough time to get into all of the different grades, but which of the, like you talked about grade three, which grades have the most difficult transitions, or is that a valid question to ask?
I don't really have data on that. Anything I tell you will be anecdotal.
Hmm.
Um, but the I can tell you that a lot of the clients that I see, like I mentioned, the grade three, in terms of the academic piece, like that's usually at the point where teachers have communicated that there might be something wrong in the academics, and then those parents are going to have to take action at that point
Hmm.
to work with the school team. So that's tough for a good amount of families, but not all. Those who have mastered the literacy piece, like grade three, is not that hard of a transition.
Hmm.
But in general, I think grade six to grade seven is a really big jump, and I know it
Hmm.
seems like the more obvious one, but the biggest challenge there is that balance of that autonomy and that connection, right? We want children to be autonomous. We want them to be able to manage their own learning and go into the high school environment and treat them as, responsible students and all that. We also have to remember that only 2 months prior, they were in the elementary school environment where that wasn't the case. They
Yeah.
had a lot more support. And so they usually need a little bit more hand holding as they start going in. And I think a lot of high schools in Montreal have become sensitive to that and put in, study skills classes or buddy systems or mentor systems or things like that to make sure that kids coming in are feeling a little bit more welcome and reassured. But that's a big transition. And the second one I'll add in is anybody going into a post-secondary environment after high school.
Yeah.
Again, a big change of environment and another jump in independence. And and if you think just for those who are going to SAGEP, for example, it's a different course load. There's a lot more independence. You're responsible for communication with school professionals. Mom and dad can't come help anymore.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
right. And it
it's a,
becomes
it's
exciting but scary all at the same time.
exactly, and many rise to that occasion. But once again, it's keeping in mind that only a couple months prior, they were also in high school and it was a different thing. So it's
Yeah.
not that we can't people develop skills and adapt, and we have to embrace that. And that's why back to school can be such a great time of year, but it can also be a little bit stressful because of all those unknowns and because we're stretching that comfort zone quite a bit.
Somehow we all make it through, right?
Exactly.
Um, on a whole other note, I have a stepdaughter who's not from here.
Mhm.
She's five going on six. She's been in Montreal about a year and a half, a little more than a year and a half. Because of the home environment, she picked up English really, really quickly, as kids do. We say they absorb languages like a sponge. She will be starting kindergarten this coming school year in a French school. And of
Mhm.
course, she's going to be going into a classe d'accueil. And because of little bits of French that she might have picked up in daycare, she's really excited to start kindergarten.
Well, I'm so
And
happy for
yeah,
her.
and we're excited for her. And buying the school supplies was an awful lot of fun. And
Mhm.
she got to choose her lunchbox, she got to choose her knapsack and all that sort of stuff. Um, I don't know how else to put the question. Is she in for a rude awakening?
I think that if you maintain that same enthusiasm that you've built up going into that environment and really, being as excited as she is in terms of getting to learn new language, getting to meet new teachers, meet new friends. I think she can do just fine. And like, you I don't know your daughter obviously,
Hmm.
but the opportunity and the way that you presented it and prepared her mentally for it, I don't think she'd be in for a rude awakening. If there are any difficulties, teachers are great at spotting if there's a challenge, right?
Hmm.
And that teacher home communication is essential if there's any challenges. But otherwise, I think there are a lot of students like your stepdaughter in Quebec who do just fine as they transition in. And she's very young in the sense that, she's learning a language at 6 years old. It's a lot easier than if she was going to do that at 17,
Yes.
right? So really nice opportunity for her, I think.
We haven't even gotten yet to the idea of students who have any kind of challenges, be they
Mhm.
language challenges, emotional challenges, behavioral challenges, for whom any of those transitions will kind of exacerbate whatever the issue is. Um, and the parents who have to deal with that, what is the best way to kind of accommodate those challenges and still be mindful of those transitions?
Mhm. Well, I think that there's I'll answer that in two parts.
Okay.
So there's the school side and then there's the home side, right? And then we have to bring those two things together. So for most students who have a history of academic challenges or a form of neurodiversity or
Hmm.
just need a little extra support, there's usually plans in place. School staff are aware of those needs. If they're not aware, then you can guarantee that it'll be a conversation early in the school year. So that homeschool communication is really important so that parents know what's being implemented at school and they can be part of that. And I think one of the other things that often gets left aside is involving the student in those conversations so they know
Hmm.
what resources are available to them, what they're allowed to do in terms of accommodation.
So that
I
they have
think
that agency going into it.
absolutely, but it's also a form of reassurance, right? Like knowing that you can, for example, I'll give you an example of, a kid who's struggling with behavior. If they know that they can go see a behavior technician and take a little bit of a break for 15 minutes just down the hall, and that's permitted for them, but they don't know they can do that,
Hmm.
right? It's not going to be an effective tool. If they know they can do it and they can request it, then that's going to be effective. And usually in those instances, if they know they can do it and they have that agency, you see fewer visits over time because again you're giving them a little bit more reassurance and control in the situation. So that's one example of really important to involve the kid to at least let them know what's available.
Yeah.
The other part, as I said, for home, you know it's true for kids who are having academic challenges and difficulties for other reasons, but it's also true for neurotypical kids and general population, and that is maintaining regular routines, right? Especially around sleep,
Yes.
and
Good point.
homework, right? These two things are essential. Um, if your child's not sleeping properly and isn't respecting bedtimes, wake up times, it's going to be really hard to pay attention. And if there's already an attention deficit or another reason why attention might be impacted, well, that lack of sleep's not going to help much, right?
Hmm.
So so that's really important. um, and the same for homework routines, just making it structured in the day, to know that it's at the same time or the same point in the schedule every day. So sometimes the time can be challenging because kids have extracurriculars. So some days they've got soccer, for example, they don't have on other days. So they're not going to start exactly the same time. But if there is some routine to that, it's just easier to get started. It reduces the battles of did you do it, did you not do it? It reduces the
Yeah.
last minute panic right before bed, like, oh, I didn't do this assignment, right? So having the regular set time to work on homework is also really protective. And and the other parts to it are communication, and within that communication, focusing on positives and opportunities where we can, and focusing on strengths. For kids who have experienced academic challenges or who have neurodiversity, oftentimes we're looking at what they can't do,
Hmm.
but a lot of the times we should be looking at what they can do and trying to work with those strengths, and kind of piggyback on things that are working to make the other parts work a little bit better, right? Um, and embracing that they might go about projects or things a little bit differently, and guiding them to strategies that are effective for them. Um, so I touched on it earlier in terms of the communication, but again, for any parent, for any kid, open-ended questions are a whole lot better than closed, right? Especially when you're working with teenagers. You're talking with a teenager and you ask a closed-ended question, you might get a grunt,
Yeah.
right? A yes or no may not even be an option in that
Yeah.
moment. But if you
And you
ask an
have to
open-ended
settle for
question,
that sometimes.
yeah, for sure. There's definitely times where you just say, okay, I got to back off here. But open-ended questions are great because you can learn a lot more about your child's thinking, have a little bit more conversation back and forth, show that curiosity, giving them more opportunity to share what they want to share about school. Um, and if there are things that come up, again, involving the kid where possible, when possible, to be part of that problem solving. Obviously, adults have to take the lead on this, and there are decisions that can't be made by children.
Hmm.
And I don't expect that to be the case in all. But anytime we can give kids agency, we're telling them that we have faith in their abilities. We want them to be part of the problem solving, and it just helps to build rapport and reassurance. And so I guess those would be that's a long-winded answer to your question, Dan. I'm sorry, but
No, it's totally fine. I
yeah,
appreciate it.
yeah.
I suspect we're going to kind of retouch on a lot of what we discussed here, but to
Mm.
wrap it up, um, can I have your top three tips for for parents who want to help their kids through some of these transitions?
So I'll, like you said, touching on some of the stuff I've already said, but I'll go a little bit further with a few. So establishing routines, I think, looking at that the week before school, 2 weeks before school, trying to get those bedtime routines in place can be really effective. You don't want to be caught with that first day of school and having to wake up at 7 a.m. when you haven't done it for a few weeks.
Hmm.
I think that would be a really helpful thing for a lot of families, a lot of kids, so they can just arrive well rested. Previewing what might happen at school, just having a conversation of what the child is excited for, what they're maybe concerned about. Starting with that conversation instead of starting with those points that we are talking about before, like grade five is a big year, like that
Yeah,
type of thing.
yeah,
Start with the
absolutely.
curiosity, then you can say, yeah, here are the things that you may have not considered, but always start, I guess, from a point of curiosity. It makes the communication a little bit more effective, and focusing on the positives where we can. It's a tough transition for families, for students, for school professionals. I think in many ways it's just a tough transition for the general population, because the
Hmm.
whole, like, if we just think of Montreal, the whole city just changes, right? We've got people trying to figure out their routes to different activities, to school, to work, people coming back from vacations. Like, there's a lot of change and a lot of transition, so it's not just the back to school piece, it's just a general time of year where things kind of change, and keeping that in mind, and reminding ourselves that it takes a little bit of time to get those settled, and being a little bit compassionate with ourselves and with kids as well. Of there's going to be a couple of bumps here and there, but to try and focus on what's working and what they're excited for, I think can be a nice buffer.
And like I said earlier, we're recording this like 3 weeks before the school year starts, but there's a
Yeah.
lot of good stuff in here that, people can re-listen to this podcast. If ever they need a lifeline,
Yeah.
it's here for them. That's a great place to end it. Thank you so much for doing this.
Well, thank you for your time, Dan. This is a real pleasure.
Absolutely. And we'll have you back again on a subsequent episode.
Well, I look forward to that. Thanks so much.
Joseph D'Intino from the Montreal Fluency Centre. And thank you for tuning in today. Make sure to download, listen, and share. You can find us on Spotify or at literacyquebec.org, and you can follow us on Instagram. And if you need assistance and support with tasks that require reading, writing, and/or digital literacy skills, call the free literacy helpline at 1-888-521-8181. That's 1-888-521-8181. I'm Dan Laxer. See you next time on What's Literacy?